So the way that we talk about UX design in school, I think it's broken. There's an incredible disconnect between how we teach UX design and how we do the actual work. And if you just got your first job, you're probably shocked that most of the team doesn't give a damn about users or design or anything like that. And if you've made it to the mid or senior level, you may be banging your head against the wall trying to quote unquote educate the team on quote unquote the value of UX, but you're getting nowhere. So if you are struggling with that disconnect between what you were taught and what your job is really like, stick around and we're going to help you get through it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. The Beyond UX Design shop is open. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some of my favorite UX and software-related quotes, or pick up some digital downloads and print them yourself. Pick up your copy of Beyond UX Design, master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to get your print on. This week's episode is brought to you by Dr. Ari Zalmanow's upcoming live Maven course, Influential Research, How to Influence Product Decisions with Research. In his live 2-day cohort-based class, you'll learn how to transform any research project into a strategic research project, learn how to never argue about methods or sample size again, learn how to position research as a partner function rather than as a service function. You'll leave the course knowing how to collect evidence like a detective, build your case like a trial attorney, and present it with a news anchor's confidence. And since you're an amazing listener, Dr. Ari is giving everybody listening 10% off his course. That's nearly $100 off. Just use the code BEYOND when you check out. So join Dr. Ari on April 23rd and 24th and become the product strategist your business needs and build the career you want. Seats are limited. Don't wait. Sign up today at beyonduxdesign.com/influential. That's beyonduxdesign.com/influential. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That would help me out so much. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Sarah Kwan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. You can get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told your friends. So the way that we talk about UX design in school, I think it's broken. There's an incredible disconnect between how we teach UX design and how we do the actual work. And if you just got your first job, you're probably shocked that most of the team doesn't give a damn about users or design or anything like that. And if you've made it to the mid or senior level, you may be banging your head against the wall trying to quote unquote educate the team on quote unquote the value of UX, but you're getting nowhere. So stick around and we're going to learn all about that today with my buddy, Joe Natoli. Same buddy. We're buddies. We're friends. I consider you a friend. All right.
Absolutely.
For 3 decades now, Joe Natoli has been walking into departments where nothing's working as it should, where backlogs grow exponentially, product quality suffers, and everybody's stressed out, overworked, frustrated, and resigned to doing the bare minimum. Joe Natoli's been consulting, speaking, writing, training, and preaching all things practical regarding UX and product design. He's helped product teams of all kinds realize quantifiable value and dramatic results from strategic product design and UX improvement. And those clients have included industry giants like Meta, Google, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, as well as U.S. government agencies like DHS, DOD, NHS, and the U.S. European Command, which is pretty goddamn cool, by the way, Joe. I think that's pretty awesome. He's taught over 350,000 students in his online course at UX 365 Academy. He's self-published 9 books and just released a 10th with Rosenfeld Media, the UX team of one. Second edition, he's spoken on stages around the globe, delivering keynotes that replace theoretical hype with practical truth. And my guest today, Joe Natoli, the one and only Joe Natoli, is on a mission to bring truth to the masses. And hopefully, Joe, I think we might do that today a little bit. Hopefully, that's the goal at least. So Joe, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so incredibly excited to have you on. Thanks for coming.
Always good to see you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity. And just the chance to hang out with you is always welcome. So
hell yeah. I love it, man. All right. So I'm not sure you necessarily need an introduction. I think anybody listening to this probably knows who you are, so we could probably skip the background and all that stuff. But I am kind of curious. I would love to know this idea that UX design, education versus the real world, fundamentally broken. There's a disconnect there. How did you come to that realization? I'm curious. You might not have ever had official quote unquote US education anyway, but I'm just kind of curious. How'd you come to that conclusion that this stuff is not, it's not where it should be?
Time and experience. I mean, I've been teaching university part-time, for example, since 1992. Okay. So from the very first, and this was, at the advent of the internet, pretty much. It was right after, the web really became a thing. So I was teaching quote unquote experience design at university. And my very first time, you realize there's already a gap because university programs in particular, let's start there traditionally, they're born out of, even graphic design programs way back when, are born out of fine art programs. The residual, residue of traditional curriculum, it's sort of left over. Okay. And it's still worked into, and it's important. I get it, right? There's a foundation in thinking visually, understand how things work visually. And there are design components there as well. There's tremendous value in that. But from the advent of the web, the world started shifting very fast. Okay. And that speed has only increased exponentially over the years. So between teaching and working, and watching this industry change, watching the world around it change, watching how businesses pay attention to product design, so to speak, right? Because everybody found themselves in the product business suddenly, whether they wanted to be or not. So education to me has just never kept pace. Fast forward a bunch of years. Now you've got a boot camp on every corner, so to speak. And they're all built on the very same model, to my eye. They're built on the idea of, we're going to focus on user research, and we're going to focus on the double diamond or the triple diamond in some cases. And we're going to focus on all these wonderful, beautifully diagrammed, perfect world recipes about how this stuff works. And it looks great. It sounds great. You can learn it. You can immerse yourself in these courses and get excited like this is the coolest thing, which it is. Right? This is one of the greatest professions on earth. To number one, create something out of nothing. And then number two, dig into the ties between human behavior and cognitive psychology and visual design and interactive design and how people perceive information and content and all sorts of stuff. But the focus is squarely on the product, the site, the app, the system. And here's the deal, to my eye, especially after 3 decades. Making things better for users or customers, focusing on user research and figuring out, where the disconnects are and what needs to change and how that manifests in interface and interaction and content and workflows, speed, responsiveness, all sorts of things. To my way of thinking, it's about 40% of the job. Okay. It's really only 40% of the job. The other 60% that grossly impacts whether a product is great or shit are a million other forces that are inherent in modern business of any kind, organizations of any kind. Those forces have a lot of power, and they are not things that, for whatever reason, they're not things that UXers and designers, product designers, researchers were not taught to look at any of those things. To this day, if you go to a boot camp right now, pick any of them, and I've looked at all their curriculum repeatedly. New programs come up, and I'm like, I'm going to check that out. It's the same regurgitated stuff. Like, this is how UX works. Here's your process. Here's your whatever. And none of that shit works when you get a job. It doesn't. It doesn't. I've been doing this too long. I've been inside too many organizations. And even the ones that give great lip service to, well, our process it's as messy and as complicated and as difficult as anything else. So in a nutshell, I'll try to sum it up this way. We're taught to go through these steps and these iterative cycles and these phases and interrelated activities to accomplish certain things, right? To make things better for users and customers. What we're not taught is how many obstacles will be in your way at every single one of those steps. And the fact that you will have to devote significant energy to overcoming those things, working through those things, turning combat into collaboration, working with people who, quite frankly, don't care about what you're doing and don't want to work with you. That's reality. Programs don't talk about it enough. One of the reasons I founded UX 365 was specifically because of that. I was done. I was like, okay, this is crazy. So I might as well stop talking about it, and complaining about it and try to do something, Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, that's something that's interesting. You called out, specifically that often design is taught in the art school. When you think about the people that come out and are actually running the companies than the people that are often hiring us. They've gone to business school. They've gone, a lot of them MBAs. A lot of them are entrepreneurs. They've run their own businesses many times, and they kind of see designers as sort of the kind of artsy fartsy, just go color things and come back when you have a screen or something that I can look at. I used to work at a startup a long time ago, and it was all in jest, I guess, but it was telling. They used to make jokes about crayons and like, oh yeah, you got your crayons, and they made those jokes. We were friends and all that, and they were kidding, but still they made jokes because they didn't necessarily take that stuff seriously. And often this is sort of that thing when you get your first job, you are taught in school often that this is the process. This is the way you do A, B, C, D, E, and out comes great software, and ignore all those things that you talk about. And you mentioned something that I want to dig into a little bit. You mentioned that all of the other things that impact that experience. And this is something that I actually, I was blessed, dude. I never would have figured this out otherwise, but I used to work for GE, giant global conglomerate, and they do these leadership trainings, and it was really cool. You get to go up to New York, and it's this big fancy resort, and you do all this leadership training stuff. But we did an entire week on this concept of VUCA, which is a weird word, sounds silly, but it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And this is something that CEOs are taught constantly. And if you Google VUCA, you're going to see stuff from CEO blogs, things speaking to CEOs, management, to C-level execs, and all that stuff. But what I find fascinating is the designers, they think that the way to build great software is to follow this process exactly, point A to point B. But really, it's just like you said, all these things of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, it's all around us. And business leaders are learning these things. And designers never learn them at all. I just happened to end up in this leadership class. It's the only reason I learned it. I'm just curious, when you're a designer and you're facing these things, how does one, taking UX 365, of course, reading your books and stuff, but I'm curious, like, how does one that has been sort of taught their entire career that the design process is gospel, how do they break that, and how do they get past that?
You got to let go of that. First of all, the idea that the design process is gospel, the UX process is gospel. No, never, ever. Okay, you are part of an ecosystem. I said this in a talk that I've been given lately, and I don't mean it in a facetious way because I don't think we do it with any bad intent or malicious intent. I don't even think we do it in an arrogant way necessarily. And I've heard people say that, and I don't agree with it. I think that we operate as if we are the center of the product universe. We're the arbiters of, no, this is what the right thing to do is for customers, for the business, for users. And I get it. Okay. It's what we're taught, essentially, right? You're taught to do that. And that goes all the way back to graphic design, by the way. I went to design school in the 80s, and you're essentially taught that you are the arbiter of taste, like you're it. Now, I was really fortunate. The program I went to, you were taught to research. And if what you were designing, no matter how great it was, if it didn't serve the needs of the people on the receiving end, you would get dragged across the concrete in front of the rest of the class by your professors. Okay, it was really intense. So there had to be a reason, there had to be rationale. So we get this idea that we're it. And what perpetuates it is this idea of UXer or product designer as hero, right? We fight for the users, we advocate for the users. Now, again, I'm going to caveat that. Job number one in UX is caring about other people. Always has been, always will be. Nothing I'm going to say changes that mandate. But what this hero thing does is it sort of encourages us to put on blinders and say, I'm only looking at this part. And you run into walls over and over and over again. And you get told, no, we don't have time for that. No, we don't have budget for that. No, you don't have 2 weeks. You got 4 days. Find a way. Dev built it this way. It's not changing. Too bad. A lot of those no's, what we don't realize is those no's have nothing to do with you. For the most part, they really don't. They're mandates from other parts of the organization, a lot of times from people you've never met and are never going to meet. That's a trickle-down effect from somebody in a corner office who needs to get their quarterly bonus because certain milestones have to be hit. In other words, launch it. I don't give a shit how well it works. Okay? And we're not taught any of that. So we're attached to this idea that our way is the way. And there's a world around us that exerts a hell of a lot more force on decisions that get made inside an organization that we're not privy to. So how do you start doing that? You start looking outside your discipline. You start figuring out what kinds of questions they're asking. You learn what the profit margin is on the product you happen to be you're working on, right? If the company has 6 products and you're constantly being told no, there is a possibility that the reason you're being told no is because the profit margin on your particular product is about this big. It's not worth the investment, period. On any spreadsheet, anywhere. It's not. It's a dumb idea to sink a shitload of money into something that doesn't really make any money. Okay? If you don't know that, you're never speaking to things that resonate with the rest of the organization. So in that instance, for example, if you're aware the margin is low and you come across something in your research that suggests, man, we could probably raise that percentage by doing this much work, which is an instance I've seen several times. If you present that and your pitch is, I know our margin is this, I think we could raise it to this in about a week. Now you're having a conversation people are willing to have with you, right? So you have to start looking outside yourself. If your company has press releases, read them. As dry as that is, press releases are like tells in playing cards. Companies put out press releases to influence what's going on in the market. Sometimes to set themselves up for something they're about to do. All right, it tells you a lot about what's important in the organization. Read the annual reports. Okay, all sorts of things. Are you going to understand it all? No. Is it going to help you have some different things in your pocket to have different kinds of conversations? Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because here's something that a lot of us as designers, we preach empathy. It's become a buzzword. Empathy for users and all that stuff. But what you're speaking to is empathy for the people that you work with. And empathy for your team, empathy for your company, empathy for your leadership team. Now, that's not to say empathy for the CEO who's driving a Beamer, flying in private jets, but empathy for the position, empathy for the person that has to make those decisions, empathy for the pressures that they're under, and what kind of things are impacting their decision, and how does that ultimately impact you? And what's funny, again, like a lot of people when they come out of design school, whether it's a boot camp, whatever, they are taught that. Just as you said, we're fighting for this. No one's going to do it but us. And then the other thing I hear all the time too is the UX designers, we're problem solvers, as if like nobody on the team is solving problems but the designers. Ask an engineer. I guarantee you they're going to say they're solving problems. Product managers think they're solving problems. The CEO thinks they're solving problems. And when you come in and say, oh, I'm the problem solver, it's so patronizing. And then it's no surprise to me that often we're sort of dismissed. The other thing that you talk about here, and this is something I want to dig into a little bit more, but what's interesting when you mentioned, press releases, earnings calls is another one that I think are really important for designers to get on. If you don't understand it, this is something that you've said, and I love this. You don't understand it. That's perfect, but that's an opportunity to have a conversation with those other people to build relationships. So the product managers, or maybe you're lucky you work in a small company, you have access to the executive team. Maybe you could do a skip level meeting or something like that and ask those questions. And these are, instead of asking generic, obviously you want to learn a little bit about them, tell about your family, where you're from, things like that, but also dig a little bit deeper. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts there or tactics or things that you could do to sort of help somebody who might be, like we mentioned in the beginning of the show, that mid-senior level designer who is banging their head against the wall, can't get things done, using tools like that we talked about. Do you have any tips or tactics or ways that somebody could sort of take that relationship and move it in a different direction, maybe using things like we just talked about?
Yeah, I think you ask very different questions. Okay, you start asking very different questions, and you ask questions about business goals in particular, but you also start asking, quite frankly, financial questions. You ask about the budget for this project. Where is it coming from? How much of it is there? Right? What's the mandate? Wait, is there a financial mandate of some sort attached to this launch? What are we trying to do? At the end of the day, look, everybody wants to make things better for customers. I get that. Are we trying to make more money, or are we trying to save money? Are we trying to do both? By what percentage? Somebody knows. Okay. And if they can't give you a specific percentage, I promise you somebody somewhere wants something different to happen. That's why you are engaged. That's why you're employed, quite frankly, right? That the sole purpose of a business, like this or not, is to make money. So you have to understand the financial reality of what you're working on. So you start having different conversations. What has to happen when this launches? What financial related result, at least, is everybody expecting here? You ask that question out loud. What's our margin like here? I'm trying to figure out, and you couch it. I'm trying to figure out what is actually worth doing. There are a lot of things that we could do to improve this. I don't know that all of them are relevant because each one of those paths is going to get us something different. So I need to fully understand what it is that management is after here when this launches. And that's how you say it. You have those conversations with people. And the first time you do it, I promise you, people will look at you like you have three heads. Like, aren't you the design guy? Like, why?
Why would you ask that?
You have to start asking very different questions. The first thing that I do with every single client I think I've ever had, and I learned this kind of the hard way because I wasn't getting anywhere. I was taking people at their word. We need to redesign this. Okay, let's redesign it. That's what I'm here to do, which is normal. But what I realized is it wasn't the problem they needed to solve, because if things didn't change after the redesign, I was the bad guy, because now they just paid me a lot of money.
It's your fault, yeah.
And all the shit that was supposed to change that didn't change, and I didn't know it was supposed to change either. Can you bemoan that and say, well, they didn't tell me? Yeah, you can. But the other truth on the other half of that is you didn't ask the question. So I started backing people up. When they came to me and said, we need to do this, this, and this, and I wouldn't say no, but I would say, okay, tell me what led you to the moment where you said, we have to redesign this. What occurred? What took place? What happened? Because there's an event or a series of events or a long, slow decline of some sort that preceded them saying, we got to fix this. Companies are no different. Anytime they decide to spend money on something, anytime they decide to throw a team at something, A, there's something that has occurred that has made them think we have to change this. And B, it's important enough that they're throwing money at it. But if you don't find out what that is, two things happen. You may improve UX, you may improve workflow, you may improve information architecture or content or usability in any number of ways. But the problem that precipitated this particular line of work will not change. And because it will not change, they'll continue to look at you, UX, product design, as an expense instead of an investment. So you have to start asking different questions because you want your work to achieve what all those people you haven't talked to are hoping that it will. That's how we stay stuck. Okay. I'm doing a workshop this week on Wednesday about service design. Loaded topic. And I'm telling you right now, part of the reason I'm doing it, people are going to hate the next thing that comes out of my mouth. I've been doing all the things attached to service design for almost my entire career. Okay. And again, I learned that about 5 years in because I wasn't getting anywhere. I got my nose broken a bunch of times with some really bad gigs with clients. And I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here. I'm doing the job and I'm kind of getting kicked anyway. You have to look beyond just the product. Like I said at the outset, there's a million other forces acting on this stuff. You have to know what that stuff is if you have a hope in hell of succeeding. So to me, this is like every single UXer, product designer, UI designer, UX researcher, I don't give a shit who it is or what your job is. The principles of quote unquote service design are things that should be part and parcel of everything that you're doing. It's right in line with what we're talking about here. But that's not taught in UX education either. We silo it and say, no. This is a service design program, and this is a UX program, and this is a product design program. Helps nobody.
Yeah. I want to talk about that. We could probably talk about the service design topic, I think, for the whole hour. But I want to dig into this a little bit because I do think this is one of those things that we're talking about where we have to understand the context and we have to understand all the things, all those variables that we talked about outside of what happens in the interface is really what we're talking about when we talk about service design. And it's interesting because I actually had a service design role in my last job. Ironically, that entire team was let go, and they said the product managers were going to do the work now, which
of course,
whatever. Anyway, so the thing that's interesting there, and this is something that happened in that org too, was the service design team was treated completely differently from the UX design team. And I'm curious when you end up on a team that treats those two very differently, it's often on you to organically reach out and uncover those insights. And maybe you're not doing the service blueprinting, maybe you're not doing some of the research, but you're at least understanding some of those things. Because my experience, the way that a lot of this, at least in the United States, I don't know Europe, I know Europe does service design very differently. And from what I hear, it's a lot better, although I haven't worked in a lot of European companies, so I can't say that for certain. But those teams are often completely separate. They're segregated, different budgets, different orgs, different leaderships, priorities, and all those things. And those product designers are always told to, shut up and get in line. That's outside of scope. We're not worrying about that. I agree with you. Completely impacts those things. But how does one go about broadening the scope of their work when reality often is fighting back and saying, no, just move the field over to the right a little bit, 5 pixels, and make the border radius 5 and change the color, and that's all I want you to do. How do you go about expanding that and influencing that, I guess, for lack of a better word, influencing that priority? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know the right word.
No, I get it. First of all, it's not easy. It's not easy. It takes extra effort, which, hey, we can have the, well, I shouldn't have to conversation. And we could have that conversation for a year. But reality is this, in this job, in life, in everything that you're ever going to encounter, there's a whole lot of things you shouldn't have to do. You're going to have to do them anyway if you want more. If you want to be seen differently, if you want to start having more productive conversations, if you want to be told yes more often, go do that. You have to start asking questions. So can you say to your boss, well, no, I'm not going to do that, move that 5 pixels thing to the left and move on because I have, a mandate to. No, you do the thing anyway. You do what you're asked to do, but you also do one of two things, and possibly both. You also go to the people who have those kinds of answers and you ask. It's not impacting your schedule. It's not changing your work. You're just trying to learn what the hell is going on here. What's being uncovered in other parts? And you couch it to that person because people can be very territorial about their stuff. You say, I just feel like it would make me a better UXer, better researcher, better product designer. I feel like it would make me better at my job if I understood more about this part of the business. That's all it is. You're saying to that person, I want to learn from what you're doing. It's a black hole for me. Not because I want to do that work. I just want to know what's going on. And you have one-to-one personal conversations. That's all this is. And the second thing that you do is once you start learning how all that works, and once you start learning where to look for certain things or where to look for clues, right? What to take a look at, and you start doing that anyway on your own time. When you're asked, no, just move the thing 5 pixels to the left, you say, okay, I did that, but I also did this. And here's why. Because I think it may result in A, B, C, and D. Nobody has to take that. Nobody has to do it. Nobody has to say yes to that. But it does a couple things. Number one, it introduces the potential of getting something better on the table, right? The other thing it does is it changes the way that person sees you. You are now no longer just an order taker. Because here's the deal. People say, well, my boss wants an order taker. Yes and no. That's a complicated situation. On one hand, they just want you to do the thing and move on. On the other hand, there's frustration that nobody can express, that there is no thinking happening, that there is no innovation happening. And that person feels it, that person's boss feels it, that person's boss's boss feels it, everybody feels it. But we have our heads down with all this pressure and we're just we just got to get stuff done. So nobody's proactively taking a step back and addressing it because they're afraid that doing so is going to throw a wrench in the works and everything's going to grind to a halt and it's going to take 5 times as long and none of which is true, by the way. So somebody in that chain, here's my thing, somebody in that chain has to take a step back and say, okay, I know you wanted this, but I also think for the record that we should consider this, and this. I think if we don't do these things, here's the consequence. I think if we do these things, here's the potential opportunity. Here's the upside. Do with that what you will. This is what I do as a consultant. Okay. I spend a tremendous amount of time presenting people with possibilities. I honestly don't care what they do with them. Not my call. It's not my call. I say it's not my office. It's not my company, but it is my job to look out for their best interests. They are paying me to do that. That's responsibility. And I take that responsibility very seriously. So whether or not they say, yes, we're going to do that or no, we're not, I present it in addition to what they insist they need. That happens quite often. I'm working with government right now. All right. It's very structured. It's very dogmatic is the wrong word. There's order, right? And there's pressure. There's a tremendous, you want to talk about forces exerting themselves from a million different directions. So time is of the essence. Structure is of the essence. Accountability to be able to track things and having good damn reasons for what you do is all very important. So it makes that harder. But again, I'm not doing my job if I don't say, I know we all collectively decided that we had to do this because we've got 4 days. At the same time, here's something that I think if we could buy an additional 16 hours somewhere, if we did this, I think it would buy us this. And sometimes what it's buying us is just breathing room to deal with the next thing. But you got to say it. You got to at least put it on the table, which means I have to do a little work outside what I expected to be doing. It's just the way it is. But it's important to me that they see me as more than just this guy who makes things look better. I mean, there's no value in that.
All right, UX fam, it is time for another mid-roll sponsor break. Let's hear it from our sponsor this week, Wix Studio. Okay, web designers, about the C word, creative burnout. Your client site has real portfolio potential, but between resourcing, feedback, tight budgets, and even tighter deadlines, it just doesn't make the cut. Wix Studio helps close that gap. Built for agencies and enterprises, you can bring your vision to life and keep it alive. With no-code animations, tons of AI tools, reusable design assets, and advanced layout tools. For your next project, check out wixstudio.com. That's wixstudio.com. And now, back to the show. This is something I say all the time, and I'd love to get your perspective here. You can't build great software without great relationships, and that's between product engineering, executives, everything up and down the chain of command. And this is something that I think is so important, though. You mentioned this before, someone asks you to do something, you're not going to push back. You do it. You do it for the first time, however many times you do, which you're a team player. And that builds trust. What you start to do is you start to build trust, and trust is the foundation of every great relationship. If you don't have trust, you don't have a relationship. And those little things, those little questions that you ask, giving insights and not just necessarily being an order taker every single time, that builds trust, which ultimately builds those relationships. And then you're seen as a partner. And to be fair, just like you said, this takes time. This is not simple. It's certainly easier said than done. Some people will embrace that as a partner. Some people will not. But this is something that I think a lot of us, we again, going back to this idea of education disconnected from reality, you're taught that you have the ideas and you have these things, but that's not how it works in the real world. And you've got to do those little things, even if you don't want to. And I think often this is something, designers, we're so altruistic, right? We think we're saving the world, and we forget that it's a paycheck. We forget that it's a job. And you just said this, and I think this is so important. They're paying you to do something, and they are expecting that thing. And you can add value by having those additional insights. But at the end of the day, they are asking you to do that thing that they hired you to do. And simply telling them no, because that's not the way you're supposed to do it, is only going to get you just sidelined. And then you're going to be seen as like this sort of just pain in the ass. Nobody wants to talk. Every time they have a conversation with you, you fight back, you argue with them. And I've worked with designers like this, which just frustrates the hell out of me. I'm sure you have too. I used to work with this designer a long time ago, and I had a product manager that would come to me with stuff like, listen, I can't go to, I'll just say Jim. I can't go to Jim. Jim's going to know what Jim's going to say, and I just don't want to, So, Jim wasn't Jim, by the way, changed the name. But, I'm sure you work with those people, and it's one of those things where it blows my mind. Those are the Jims of the world are the ones who they don't get the seat at the table. Then they think everyone else is to blame. They never take responsibility for their actions. And it sort of ends up just being a self-fulfilling prophecy. They don't end up influencing teams, and they don't end up getting anything done. And I don't know, that idea of just trust. I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but those little seedlings of relationships, to me, that's just so important.
What you just said, I mean, that phrase is one of the greatest things I think I've ever heard. It's 100% accurate. Here's the part that nobody talks about. When you say to somebody, no, we're not doing that. That's a bad idea. It's a dumb idea. However you say it, no matter how politely you say it. All right, well, that's not good UX. That's not, in a way, it's disrespectful. Okay? Because that's just another person trying to get the things done that they are on the hook for. There is somebody above them, just like there's somebody above you saying, you have to do this. We need this result. You're on the hook. Figure it out. Product managers in particular, okay? I think it's one of the worst jobs on the face of the earth, because you are in the crossfire of everybody's stuff. You are. You're getting pressure from all sides. And management especially is looking at them like, well, you're the product manager, figure it out. All right. Part of the reason they act so much, part of the reason they make decisions that we feel like are ours to make is because they're being pushed to make those decisions. I don't give a shit. Figure it out. You got 4 hours. Make a call. They have to make a call because they got to answer to somebody. That somebody's not going to wait for you to do a week of research or 2 weeks of research. That person who you've never met doesn't give a shit. They're pressing that product manager and saying, I need an answer now. We need to move now. That is reality. So to say to that person, well, that's not the way this should be done. We have to do this, and that. You're ignoring, you're dismissing the reality of their existence. You are. No matter how politely you do it, no matter diplomatically you do it, that is what's happening. It's the wrong answer. You need to find out what their mandate is. You need to find out why they're pushing so hard to do it this way. And you ask that. People say to me all the time, like, well, how do I do that? My God, you ask the question. Tell me why you're adamant about doing it like this. I'm not challenging you. I want to make sure I understand, because if I'm going to go away and do some work, I want it to support the outcome that you need. So just take 5 minutes and tell me what needs to happen when this launches, or when we publish this change or whatever it is. Tell me what has to occur. because I can do a better job if I'm aware of what you're after. That's the conversation. That person's blood pressure will relax and they'll tell you. The key here in anything is trust, as you said. And the only way you build trust is if you make that person feel like, look, I've got your back. I'm here to have your back. My job is to have your back. Okay. We're not on opposite sides. We're rowing in the same boat. So I need to know what you're after and tell me, because here's the thing. If what they're proposing is in fact a bad idea and it's not going to get the outcome you want, now you also have an opportunity to go away, do the thing that they're pushing for, but also come back and say, I thought about this, and in doing this work, I thought of something else, or I stumbled upon, our analytics and I saw something else. And I thought, well, maybe it's more likely that if we did it this way, people would do this, customers would do this, and then you would get the result. That's a very different conversation. That person feels heard all the way through that exchange. This stuff about we have to fight and my friend Rich said something to me once. He goes, it's not about pushing back. It's more about, I think he said, pull forward, right? You want to bring people with you and say, look, I'm on your side. I'll say again, this is why I really believe this. And part of the reason clients treat me the way that they do, part of the reason I have a certain degree of autonomy, right? And trust is largely because of that. The very first thing I am doing from the very first conversation, when it's still a sales conversation, when I'm still trying to land this client, these are working meetings. I'm trying to find out what their pain is. What are you worried about? What are you upset about? I understand there's a project. Let's table that right now. Tell me what's going on here. Okay, so I can tell you how we could go about working together to fix this. But that's got to come first. We're wrapped up in this idea of ownership, of authority, because again, it's what we're taught. And as you alluded to, I think a couple minutes ago, the reality from when you graduate from school or go through your boot camp or whatever, the reality is that you're taught that you're going to have responsibility and authority. And the truth is, once you get the job, you really only have one of those things. It's responsibility. So everything that we're talking about here, not only does it need to be taught, it needs to happen on the job. I mean, if you are unlucky enough to not have been exposed to any of this stuff or learned any of these things, you got to start finding inroads to do it, because that's the reality. It's going to be tough until you start to get some balance and people feel like they trust you, not just to do a good job, but they trust you to care about everything else that's going on here.
I love that. So I want to, I think this ties perfectly into the topic of your book, which I want to get to your book in a second. And I want to talk a little bit about some of that and what people can take away from it, because we would be remiss, I think, to talk about your new book. It's an awesome book and it's a great resource. But before we do that, I'm curious, the last thing I want to talk about, you mentioned this earlier, is just watching out for the regurgitated crap and all the stuff you see online and things like that. I would love to get your perspective and on social media. And I don't think you're anti-social. You're on social media. You're on X and Twitter and LinkedIn and things like that. So you're embracing it and things like that. But I'm curious. There's a lot of crap out there. There's this idea. A lot of people talk about, you need a filter when you go online. I am curious for those who are, and I don't think this is a junior design problem. Frankly, I think this is something. It doesn't matter your level. You can be influenced by, let's face it, influencers. People who are just trying to hawk their shit and they're trying to sell you stuff. And often we see this rosy, this is how we should do it. And people are made to feel bad when they're not doing those processes at work, things like that. I would love to get your perspective when it comes to social media. How do people filter that out? How do they find the actual nuggets of real wisdom in the sea of just people selling new tools and whatever it is they're selling? How do people go about navigating that and not just get led down the wrong path? Do you have any thoughts? What do you tell people when you advise them to watch out?
There are two things that I tell people all the time to be wary of. Number one, if there's a high fidelity diagram attached to the post, be wary. Seriously, okay? Immediately. That's veneer, and it's veneer for a reason. That's number one. Number two is that if you read the post and there is any hint of, if you're not doing this, then, it's not the right way. If there's any hint of that's what you're doing, if it doesn't include these things, is not real UX or real product design, no matter how subtly it's phrased, be wary. Okay. If it's the same, I also believe that everybody should ignore any post that is UX 101 or Design 101, and people regurgitate stuff that's like the basic principles of design or UX. Or they're quoting Steve Jobs or they're quoting Don Norman, or like, okay, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. What you should look for in anything you pay attention to is tangibility, is reality, is actionable something. You should read it and you should be able to see yourself or your situation or things that you've dealt with or things that you're curious about, right? And need to know more about in that post. There has to be some of that in there. Now, the caveat to all of that is this: social media, most people use it to promote something. That promotion may be themselves. It may be, I'm trying to get a job. I'm trying to show people that I know what I'm talking about. It may be a company trying to sell a product. I'll tell you flat out, I use social media to promote the things I do. I use it to promote my workshops. I use it to promote the UX 365 Academy, to promote my books. But my approach, and I hope that I get this right more often than not, my approach is and I got this from my wife, the business marketing genius for entrepreneurs. I want to give to get. I want to give you something before I ask you to do something. So if I'm going to write a post, if I'm going to send an email, if I'm going to do whatever, my hope is that the 70% of that email is going to be something that will help you in some way, whether you do or do not enroll for the academy or buy the book or sign up for the workshop or whatever it is. That's my hope. I'm trying to give you something you can walk away with, try, get some results from, and say, you know what, he was right. Or give you a different way to think about something, or dispel some myths that I know are probably keeping you stuck. I guess that's my overall point. When you look at social media posts, you have to ask yourself, does this help me in some real way? Or is it just posturing? Is it just, well, UX should be like, who cares? Okay, life is hard enough all by itself. I don't need people telling me what I should or should not be doing, and you don't. And I say you collectively, everybody hearing this, you don't need anybody telling you what is or is not UX or product design or how you should or shouldn't do it. Like, you need to let all that go. I coach people every single week who at some point, sometimes first session, sometimes third session, sometimes it's like the sixth session, say to me, so I have been doing UX work all along.
Yeah.
Now, I both love and hate that moment for obvious reasons, right? I love the fact that they're seeing it and they're like, okay, I am legitimate, right? My way is as valid as anybody else's. I hate it because it makes me tremendously angry that there are people online who make other people feel like that. I think it's a shitty thing to do.
Yeah, I love that you say that, and that's something interesting about our profession, I guess. And there's often a lot of people who talk about gatekeepers and trying to keep people out. It's possible to teach yourself these things. It's possible to learn the processes and the fundamentals and things like that. I don't think you need to have a 4-year degree or a master's degree or a doctorate in human-computer interaction to do this work. And it is something where a lot of the principles are directly applicable to a lot of different things. I think like the one that comes to mind first is service industry, waiting tables, bartending. I mean, customer experience.
Absolutely.
Like you talk about customer experience and understanding how, like, no, you're not designing an interface, and clearly UI design is not part of that. But how you interact with people, an error message, so the kitchen messed up your order. You've got to go tell the table that, their steak is going to be late or something. I mean, you can relate that to how you word an error message. I mean, there's so many things,
Agreed,
I think, that are directly applicable when it comes to service industry work. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people that poo-poo that. And I don't know. It kind of drives me nuts when I see people saying those things. Clearly, UX design is not the exact same as waiting tables. But I think there's a lot of overlap in principles there. The other thing I think about with social media, and this is something that kind of drives me crazy with just mentorship in general and things like ADP lists where I can get, find a mentor in 30 minutes or less. And, you ask them for advice and they just tell you what they think. But real advice has to have the context. And thinking back, tying it back to this topic today, reality for everybody is different. Every team functions in a different way. Every team has different budgets, different processes, different needs, different makeup, the number of people and all that stuff. And when someone tries to tell you the way to do the job, it may be applicable in their exact situation that they've experienced, but that does not mean it's going to be applicable for you. And so the reality is so different. It's really hard to take that advice. And when you're reading through LinkedIn posts or Twitter posts or YouTube videos or whatever you're watching, it's got to be through that lens of my own personal circumstances and my own personal context, right? And so I love that you call that out, that people just giving just all that advice. If you're not thinking critically about it, you're going to go down the wrong path. And then you're going to end up just like those people that you talked about in some of your courses that are confused and frustrated and they end up getting burnt out. And often I've worked with a lot of people I've met, people I had conversations with that just have given up and gone to different industries and decided they didn't want to learn UX, or even if they did have a job, they're like, I'm out, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. And it's sad. It really is sad. All right, Joe. So before we get out of here, I want to talk a little bit about the book. I want to give you an opportunity to promote the book. Tell us a little bit about the book. The first question I have, and I've listened to a bunch of interviews you've done talking about the book. Something that I think a lot of people probably may not know, especially new people, they might not know that this is the second edition. There's one that came out a while ago. And I'm curious, I don't think I've heard you answer this question, but I'm curious. The differences between version 1 and version 2. Why version 2? Is there a reason why you think there needed to be a version 2? And what is different in version 2 that you might not have gotten if you have read 1? And why would you want to buy 2? If you've already read 1, what's different in 2? Why would you want to pick it up?
Well, I think the industry has changed radically. How we do this work has changed radically. The pressure on organizations to deliver improvements faster, all the things that you and I just talked about are part and parcel of everything that we do right now. And those things weren't necessarily true to the same degree when UX was sort of enjoying its sort of heyday, or when it was new, right? Because Leah wrote their initial book because there was no guide. Nobody had this book. It didn't exist. And she was like, it was born out of personal need. She was like, this is crazy that all this stuff isn't collected in one place. So it was called the UX Team of One. But we've always joked about the subtitle probably should be every possible thing you could ever need to know about being a UXer or designer or whatever. The foundation of the book, which is to bring all this mystic whatever down to earth and say, here's how this works. And there is no one right way. There's lots of ways. There's lots of things you can do. There are lots of things you should have in your toolkit so that, like you just said, in any given context, your team, your environment, your business, your constraints, your customers, your users, your product, your whatever, you need a bunch of things that you can lean on and say, all right, I'm going to use this. In this situation, I could probably use this because I've only got this much time with the target and I've only got 2 people from management that are willing to play with me. Okay, great. We'll do this. It'll be fast. I'll get what I need. The core idea of the book was essentially that. That has not changed. A lot of what has changed is how you go about doing these things, how you champion those things, and quite frankly, having a more solid understanding of all the things you and I just talked about today. If I injected anything to this book, it was a lot more of, okay, I understand how you're told all this stuff works. Here's the reality. All right. So we expanded it much to the publisher's chagrin because they had to pay for more paper. It expanded to like almost 300 pages. But we felt like this stuff is really important. And there were things that just couldn't be left out. So all we really took away were some older methods and processes that, quite frankly, wouldn't fly in an agile or iterative environment, and an environment where time is an absolute scarcity, right? It's just a luxury you don't have. And what we focused on, what I really wanted to focus on, is quick wins, low effort stuff, right? Here are some things you can use. All you need is a room and some human beings. Okay? It requires no special anything. Use software, great. Don't use software, great. Doesn't matter. You can still get where you're going. So that to me is what was most important, right? And I would say the other thing I really wanted to do with this edition is I wanted to hit the business side of things a lot harder. People have heard me say this more than once. I'm going to say it again, not because I want to ruffle feathers, but because it's in line with everything you and I have talked about today. And it's certainly in line with this book. My whole thing is business first, users second. And you do great things for human beings, customers, users. Yes, of course. Like I said before, job 1 is caring about other people. At the same time, you don't have a hope in hell of ever getting any of that done if you can't get the business on board with it, if you can't get them to spend the money to do it, if you can't get them to give the team the time to do it, or research, or the access to users, or whatever. You have got to fight and win that battle first. So there's a lot of that in this book. How do you get to what's worth doing? And how do you communicate that to other people so that they understand that it's worth doing in a way that's relevant to them, not just to you? right? So if I had to sum it up, I mean, I think that's the big difference. I was a massive fan of this book when it came out. It was one of those things, and there's 3 books that I feel this way about. This is one of them, where I read it and I went, oh, I wish I'd written this book. I mean, she and I see things very, very similarly, or I think we're kind of cut from the same cloth that way, in that there's no time for artifice or rules or formality or no, okay. Everybody should be able to dig in and get what they need here.
That begs the question, what are the other two? The other 2 books?
The other 2 books that I felt that way about were, well, I take it back. There are 3. The Elements of User Experience, Jesse James Garrett. My head exploded when I read that book. Okay? and by the way, that was my Jesse and Alan Cooper, because one of those books is The Inmates Are Running the Asylum by Alan Cooper. Those 2 books, I was like, I want to be these 2 guys when I read them. That was really early on in my career. And I was just like, this is incredible. So by the way, to have Jesse write the foreword for this book.
Yeah.
Are you kidding
awesome.
me?
I've heard you mention that in another interview too. You mentioned.
I don't have, I'm getting chills right now saying it out loud. I respect that man so much. His work means so much to me. I would not have a career without him and Alan in particular. Okay. And I've told them both, much to their embarrassment. And the other book is Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think. Same thing. I read it, I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Because it just is. None of these people had any artifice about how they went about doing what they did. There's no mystery. There's no you must join the secret society in order to be one of us. It was like, no, let's cut the shit. Here's how it is. Let's get real. And I'm a soldier for that, if anything.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. All right. So, tell us where can we get the book?
You can get the book at Rosenfeld Media, rosenfeldmedia.com. If you go to givegoodux.com on the books page, you'll certainly see a link to it. You can find everything else that I do at either givegoodux.com or www.ux365academy.com. Workshops, books, courses, training videos, kitchen sink.
Love it.
It's sort of all there.
I love it. All right, Joe. So before we get out of here, I've got a few questions I'd like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't get a chance to talk about that you think is important as it relates to this disconnect between education and reality?
Yeah, I guess I want to say a couple things to that, right? Number one, none of that has to mean that you're stuck. None of that has to mean that you can't rise up to any of the things that we talked about, okay? It's not a mountain. It's a 3-inch curve. It's a matter of asking very different questions. So number one, don't ever sit down and say to yourself, well, I'm never going to be able to get there. Untrue. Absolutely, categorically untrue. The second thing I want to say related to everything you've heard today, given the gatekeeping, given the pressure, given all the false ideas we have about this work, you belong here, okay? If you want to do this work, you belong here. Your way is as valid as anybody else until it's proven to you that it isn't, all right? People get wrapped up in, well, I'm not doing this process this way, and I'm not doing, look, are things getting better or not? Is anything changing or not? Did you impact some person or some activity or some financial report in some way, right? Did anything get better? That's all that matters. Being told no is not a value judgment of who you are and what your worth is, okay? You belong here, period.
I love that. That's a beautiful sentiment. That belongs on a mug.
I think so.
On a mug. You put that on a mug. Sell it in your shop. All right, Joe. So like I said, I've got a few questions I like to ask all my guests just to help everybody get to know you a little bit better. First thing that comes to your mind, you don't have to think too hard about it. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
My favorite non-design book? Oh, man. That would probably be, it's going to change, okay, from time to time. But the first thing that came to mind is I'm a big fan of The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. It was a tie. It was a tie between that and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson.
I could totally see you as a stoic, by the way. I don't know if you consider yourself a stoic, but I could see
I'm right in line with that. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I'm just right in line with that, because the whole thing is, look, just accept what is. This is reality. It does not have the power over you that you think it does. The only time, and this is a Buddhist thing as well, okay, for me, it always has been, but we suffer when we struggle against what is instead of accepting it. And, doing the very next thing, like, that's okay. What are we going to do about it? So I firmly believe in that. And those readings, I typically take a look at that book every single day and I read something just to sort of keep me grounded. Okay. Bad stuff is going to happen. It's the way it is.
I love that. I hadn't heard that specific quote before.
Oh, the Buddhist thing?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that.
It goes, actually, it's the first precept. It's like the Four Noble Truths. The first precept is pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, right? And it goes on to say that suffering is resistance. It's a refusal to accept what's happening, you know? So are you going to feel pain? Yes. Things are going to happen to you. They're going to hurt. You're going to have experiences that are going to hurt. Suffering is a different thing. Suffering comes from just sort of refusing to accept what's happening, you know, and saying, oh, this shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be this way. You're right. It shouldn't, but it is.
I love that. Yeah, so we talked about VUCA before. I give this talk called the UX Uncertainty Principle, and it's all about focusing on what you can't control and what you can't control. And this is interesting. One of the things that they talk about in a lot of the material about, or the literature about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, is focusing on what you can't control, because accepting the things you can't control and focusing on the things you can. And you can't control market volatility. You can't control technology changing constantly, but you can control what you and your team do to account for that. And so anyway, I have this very Buddhist approach to software, building software. I love that. I didn't even realize that, but I love it. All right, next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
Oh, my favorite non-design podcast is probably The Vinyl Guide with Nate. I'm forgetting his last name, but he's awesome. I'm a record nerd. I'm a vinyl nerd. I'm musically obsessive. Like, music is the driving force of just about everything. And he just really digs into some of it. Like, the last episode was 3 people talking about the state of vinyl and how it's changed and the resurgence and the history and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like a kid in a candy. It's like, I love this so much. The minutia of it is just a blast in a way that I can't really explain. It's a really fun thing.
I dig it. Yeah, we're trying to get our kids into vinyl. We've got a record player, a couple of record players actually, and we've got like tons of records. And my kids are fascinated.
Yeah.
How the physical thing, the analog, just like the sound coming out, even just like the science behind that is fascinating. But
it's a different deal.
Anyway, yeah, it's really cool. My kids think it's really cool. And I'm always like, don't touch it. Don't touch it. You're going to mess, you're going to scratch it. They want to go play around with it. I'm like, no. Anyway. All right. Next up, what is your favorite meal? This could be something you cooked, something you had at a restaurant, travel somewhere, something your grandma used to cook. Favorite meal?
I would say that the first thing that springs to mind is deep fried squid, which if you're Italian, you call it calamari.
Calamari. Yeah.
People say calamari, but grew up having it at holidays, especially at Christmas, was instantly my favorite thing. And I, as a tradition, I do it every year as well. You go buy the squid, you clean it, you deep fry it. It's tradition. So that's really close to my heart in a lot of ways. So I would say that.
I love it. Do you guys do the 7 fishes for Christmas?
It's too much work.
Just too much work. We never did. I grew up Italian. My grandma was Italian. My grandpa was Italian. Well, my mom was Italian, obviously. But anyway, my great grandparents came over from Sicily in early 1900s. Anyway, we didn't do the 7 fishes either, and people were like surprised. I'm like, yeah, it's too much work.
Growing up, we did, but I mean, plus that's my wife's department. I'd be lying to you if I said I was cooking holiday meals. Okay.
Oh no, you don't cook?
I'm not that good. I mean, I can cook, but I don't have the organizational skill, and I'm nowhere in the same universe in terms of how good a cook she is. Now, that sounds like one of those bullshit things people say to not cook. I'm happy to do it, but my planning skills are just not good.
It's funny. You mentioned the organizational skills required to create a holiday meal. And I cook all the time. I cook almost every meal in my house, but I do not do holiday meals because planning and that's got to be ready at this time. So I got to put this in at that time and this and that. And everything comes out at once or worse, everything comes out hours before it's supposed to. And it's cold. I can't do holiday planning, meal planning. I don't know how people do it. God bless my grandma who used to do it all the time, but good Lord. All right. Next up, what is your favorite vacation spot?
My favorite vacation spot, I think is Hawaii. Before that, I would say anywhere with a beach, but Hawaii is a whole different ballgame. Okay. There's something about the vibe of the place it just permeates everything. All right. And it's an experience I've never had anywhere else. And I've been to some wonderful places where you feel great and relaxed, but there's something about the vibe there that is so relaxed and so positive. I don't know how to describe it. It's just every place that we went, I was just on a different plane the entire time. And we were there for 2 weeks.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I guess you're all the way on the East Coast. So that's a long trip to go for a week, I guess. So you got to take a couple weeks off travel time to get there, just a couple days. But yeah, I've never been to Hawaii. It's on my list of one of many places on my list. Everybody,
you should go.
How great Hawaii is. I mean, obviously it's Hawaii. I got to go before I'm too old and I can't go. All right, last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Oh, that's easy. because I don't use Figma at all. My favorite design tool is a whiteboard, markers.
Yeah, I love it.
Hands down. It's the only thing that I use. I have started using my tablet, my iPad, but I'm using it to write handwritten notes. I don't use software for anything. I can't, what I discovered at an early age, taking notes in class, is that I have to be able to draw to make sense of what I'm hearing. I also have to draw to make sense of what I'm thinking and work through things. So every meeting, I'm drawing boxes and arrows somewhere, right? Whether anyone asks me to or not, it started because I'm like, look, I need to do this just to be present and to be valuable. So it was born out of necessity, but now it's the best way for me to get answers really fast and uncover some things really fast. So now it's the only tool I use.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I try not to take notes on the computer either. And like, even in meetings, like when I'm on Zoom or something, I still write notes, and like I have notebooks, and I got a nice pen. So I, carry it with me, and I never want to like lose it and stuff. But yeah, man, I've also heard too that like writing things down helps you remember things more than just typing it. I don't know how true that is. I read that on the internet, so it must be true. But yeah, I love that, man. Just like a whiteboard. That's one thing I miss. I'm not saying I want to go back in office 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. But one thing I miss about remote work is the whiteboard in a room with a bunch of people. It's like, nowadays, you could do it on Miro and stuff, that's fine, but it just doesn't beat just getting up there and drawing stuff on the board. And I miss that more than anything. That's like that and the coffee.
Yeah. You know what I do for what's worth? I'm going to share this with you in case you ever have occasion to use it. And I learned this I saw Jared Spool do this once. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. He's got 2 cameras, right? There's one here for now. And then he's got an overhead arm with a light on it. And there's a camera facing down at the desk. So he just switches cameras. So that's what I do. I have a huge sheet of paper on this drawing table that I work on. That's my desk. And I have the camera facing down and I'm drawing like I would on a whiteboard.
Yeah. If anyone hasn't ever taken one of Jared Spool's courses, check it out because they're free. A lot of them are free as well. But he does not use decks. He just writes everything, and his handwriting is so bad. It's like impossible to read his handwriting, but I don't know. There's just something about je ne sais quoi. I don't know what it is, but it's just something about Jared Spool's presentation skills. And he's funny. He's like corny. Like terrible dad jokes, but I laugh. I think Jared Spool's hilarious. All right, Joe, this has been an amazing conversation, man. We've had you for a little while. I really appreciate you coming on. One more time before we get out of here, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you and the books and all that stuff. One more time before we get out of here.
Right. Well, I would love it if you would go to www.ux365 Academy, ux365academy.com to check that out. It is where I spend a whole lot of my time. We're trying really hard to create the kind of education that addresses all the things that we've been talking about here, right? Training, self-serve videos. We do live workshops almost every month. All those workshops are free to members, and they're paid for the public. Members get them free. They're recorded. They're stored there. VIPs get a monthly group coaching session with me every single month. That's a 2-hour session. And we're really trying to level the playing field. We're trying to make something that's palatable for people who are edged out of either traditional education or boot camps, right? So you're not going to spend $5,000, $15,000, $10,000. You're going to spend either $199 a year or $299 a year for access to everything. Okay. And the only difference between the 2 programs, like I said, is the VIP gets you one-on-one. So we wanted to kill the cost. We wanted to invite everybody in who sort of doesn't have a shot at these other programs. And the bigger thing is to teach all the things. It's like the missing manual to your UX careers. Teach all the things that you and I have talked about today that nobody ever talks about. And again, this was born largely from like, okay, enough. I need to stop complaining and I need to do something about it or try to do something about it.
I love it. Yeah, and I love the group calls as well, because it builds a sense of community. Because there's a lot of courses online where you can, pay and you get to watch a bunch of videos and it's self-paced and all that. But the community is so important too. And that's that support system, that support network that will like keep you going when you're feeling, imposter syndrome or self-doubt or whatever. All that stuff will help you. And then even when you get a job, you still have those connections and the people that you've met and everything else. And that's just such an important thing. That network is huge. And I love what you're doing over there, man. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Joe and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on how you can overcome that disconnect between what you're taught in school and what the real world is actually like. But I'm curious, are you struggling with the real world applications of UX design and that disconnect between what you were actually taught? Have you overcome it? And if so, I'd love to know how. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. Don't forget to check out the Beyond UX Design shop. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to pick up some big, beautiful UX-themed art prints and digital downloads you can print yourself. Grab your paperback copy of Beyond UX Design, master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to get your print on. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Roddy, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, Zoe, and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free. And you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. Join Dr. Ari Zelmanel on April 23rd and 24th to become the product strategist your business needs and build the career you want. Learn how to collect evidence like a detective, build your case like a trial attorney, and present it with the news anchor's confidence. Seats for Dr. Ari's course are limited, so don't wait. Sign up today at beyonduxdesign.com/influential and save nearly $100 off Dr. Ari's course. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes, along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. And that is... I guess I don't know why I'm talking, but we're done. That's the end of it, dude. Anyway, very anticlimactic way to end the conversation, but yeah, we're done, man. How was that everything you wanted to talk about? We get everything?
It was fantastic.
Awesome, man.